you are not defined by the outcome that you get, but instead you're defined by the identity you choose after the outcome. Mark Zuckerberg creates something called Facebook. Zuckerberg stole the idea of Facebook. Most people didn't even know what Bitcoin was at that point. Most people laughed at it, and people actually thought it was for nerds, criminals, tech weirdos. People were calling Bitcoin a scam. The true success is about what you choose to do when you feel like you're losing. There is going to be a moment where life is going to hand you something that doesn't feel like the win you wanted. And this can become... Welcome to Rich and Regulated, where women learn to build wealth in alignment and flow. I'm Jessica Soul. For over a decade, I've helped women create the lives of their dreams, and here I'll share how I build wealth, fast-track results, and reveal money truths that will blow your mind. Let's get wealthy. Let me take you into one of my favorite stories in the entire wealth world. And this story proves exactly what I always say to my clients, which is that you are not defined by the outcome that you get, but instead you're defined by the identity you choose after the outcome. And this story starts at Harvard, of all places. A group of young men building ideas, competing, hustling, dreaming of changing the world, and 3 of them would, but in completely different ways. So, Mark Zuckerberg creates something called Facebook. Just a small little college project. Nothing serious, nothing really global, at least not yet. And then we have the Winklevoss twins, and I hope I'm saying that right, but Cameron and Tyler, and along with them, their partner, Divya. Those 3 men believed that Zuckerberg stole the idea of Facebook off of them years and years ago. While they were building this platform, they actually began by calling it Harvard Connect and later Connect You. They fully believed that Zuckerberg took their concept, ran with it, and left them behind. And whether this is true, whether you agree, it doesn't really matter. But what matters most is what happened next. Basically, they decided to sue Mark Zuckerberg. They went into full-blown legal battles with a man who was becoming a tech giant before anyone had even realized what Facebook would become. And now, if we just pause there for a moment, this is something to really think about, because most people, if something like this happened, they would crumble before the lawsuit even began. You know, most people don't even have the emotional stamina to fight a billionaire-to-be, right? Most people wouldn't even try. They would just kind of fold and, cut their losses and move on. But these men were not driven by fear. They were driven by their conviction. And so Facebook becomes massive, as we all know, billions of users, and that level of cultural influence where nobody in their 20s has any business holding, right? And in the midst of all of that, this lawsuit settles. Zuckerberg pays the twins $65 million, a combination of cash and Facebook stock. And that was their payout to literally just walk away. And now, here's the thing that I really wanted to share about this story is this psychological pivot point that most people probably missed. Now, for most, that would have been the end of the story, right? 65 million, they're wealthy. They would have taken the money. They might have felt a little bit bitter. They might have felt a little bit defeated, held on to some resentment as they watched this become billions of dollars worth that they could have had. But instead, they could have just sat there and talked about this story for years and years to come and done their pity party. That guy stole my idea. It should have been me, all that type of behavior. But that's the path that ordinary people would have taken. But extraordinary people, like these guys, they treated this really, really differently. And every ending is the beginning of a next empire, if you choose for that to be the case. And so the twins didn't see that $65 million as like a consolation prize. What they saw it as was seed capital for their own giant project. And so they didn't see themselves as the guys that Zuckerberg beat. Instead, they saw themselves as men with a second chance, and they didn't let ego make them small. They actually used vision to make them dangerously and wildly successful in their own right. And so while the world was obsessed with Facebook and the twins became obsessed with something else entirely, which was Bitcoin, of course, right? And so these guys started buying Bitcoin when it was worth under $10 per coin. I want you to let that sink in, right? Imagine being that forward thinking. Most people didn't even know what Bitcoin was at that point. Most people laughed at it, and people actually thought it was for nerds, criminals, tech weirdos. People were calling Bitcoin a scam back then. But the twins saw something else. They saw the next financial revolution before the world did. And they saw the opportunity to get in early on a technology that actually would end up redefining money forever. And what they saw was a way to build a future that nobody could take from them. Not Mark, not the courts, not the system, not the world. And so they took a portion of that Facebook settlement. Some say it was around about 11 million, and they poured it into Bitcoin. And here's where I want to kind of talk to you about the identity shift that comes in, right? Most people, if they were to make 65 million, they would just disappear into a lifestyle, buying houses, cars, maybe a yacht or a private jet. They'd probably spend before they invested and assume they'd made it in life. They'd inflate the lifestyle before stabilizing their wealth. But the twins did it so differently. They didn't do any of that. They invested, they grew, they built, they matured, and their Bitcoin holdings grew into billions and billions of dollars. Then they created Gemini, which is one of the world's most trusted crypto exchanges. They funded projects, built infrastructure, shaped early crypto culture, and they literally became pioneers of something that people would have never imagined. And these are the men who were, I suppose, supposed to disappear, take their 65 million and run. These are the men who kind of, in some ways, lost the lawsuit, and they became leaders in the next financial era. It's a super, super cool story. They were the men who were written off as the footnotes, and they ended up becoming billionaires, right? And this is not because they won the legal battle. It's because they won their identity battle, and they decided to act in accordance with the strength that they had from building a project like Facebook. So let me tell you why I love this story. Basically, what it is for me is it reveals the truth about who people are at the core, and it reveals the truth about people's standards and about their wealth and maturity and their ability to reinvent. And I think most people really think that success is all about winning, right? But I believe that true success is about what you choose to do when you feel like you're losing. Anyone can feel powerful when life is handing them everything they want, but real power is revealed in those moments when life actually says no, right? And woman to woman, there are so many women, and I say this with love, but so many women collapse when things don't go their way. They internalize the no. They make their non-success mean something about their worth. They doubt their future. They shift or doubt their true identity. They get overlooked once, and then they start to shrink. They get rejected, and then they disappear. They get one outcome that they don't like, and then they make this decision that they're no longer the woman for the job, and they basically fail before they've even tried again. Just quickly, guys, if you're a woman who's earning well but still feels like your money isn't working for you, I can help. My Build Your Wealth portal is the perfect place to begin, and for less than $100 a month, I'll teach you the exact groundwork that has allowed me to create freedom for my family. Just hit the link in the show notes to connect into my community today. Now back to the episode. Your empire is not built inside of your wins. Your empire is built in the response to your losses. And the twins, they didn't get Facebook, right? But instead, they got billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. They got $1 trillion opportunity, and they got the future that Zuckerberg could never have control of. And that's what identity work is really about. It's not about affirmations. It's not about positive quotes and journaling until your hand is cramping. Identity work is, who do you become when life does not go the way you wanted it to? Who do you become when people are underestimating you? Who do you become when the outcome is not yet yours, And who do you become when you're handed an ending? Because mature women do not collapse. They pivot, they redirect, they reinvent, and they rise. And the story could have been we sued Mark Zuckerberg and he beat us, he gave us a tiny payout, and we spent it all in 5 years. But instead, the story became we built an empire inside of an industry that he could never touch. And this is what I want for you to take from this, not to rely on perfect timing, not to rely on perfect circumstances, and not to avoid your obstacles, but instead to become the woman who sees obstacles as direction, who sees endings as redirection, and who sees disappointment as a doorway to her next level of wealth. This is the kind of woman who uses what she did receive, not what she didn't, to build something enormous. And look, it may not be your $65 million moment coming, maybe not quite literally, but symbolically, there is going to be a moment where life is going to hand you something that doesn't feel like the win you wanted. And this can become, if you choose it to, the foundation of the future that was actually meant for you. So the question isn't, will you get what you want? The question is, what will you do with what you are given? And this is the difference between being erased and becoming undeniable. So I want to give you an example of something in my life, or I suppose a pivotal moment where I chose to become the woman who sees obstacles as direction. So back in 2020, I was faced with divorce. I was going through a really tough time in my life. I was 36 years old. I had a ton of debt, and anyone who would have been looking from the outside and understood my position at that point would have been like, there is a lot of obstacles that this woman is facing. For me, I had a choice at that point in my life, right? I could have easily decided that it was over. There was no way I was going to create success. I could have used those obstacles to crush my soul, to become directionless, to lose my vision. And that would have been a really easy path. And a lot of that really came down to me deciding to shift my identity, to shift into the woman that I needed to be, the woman that I was asking of myself. I had to raise my standards, and I literally had to use that hard time as direction. And so at that point in my life, I was heavy into creating vision. I still am today. I asked myself, all right, so if I'm to get over this debt, if I am to create what I want to create, if I am to get to a point where I have that 7-figure portfolio, if I am to become a wealthy woman again, what is going to be required of me? And at that point, I decided to pivot. That was a really difficult thing to do, at a time where all I wanted to do was hide under the covers and close the curtains, be in the dark, and literally just feel sorry for myself. I actually used it to create a brand new direction in my life. So my coaching business pivoted. I started to look at ways to multiply money. It was literally one of the greatest blessings I could have ever had. So feeling at the bottom of the barrel actually was something that I used as a catalyst to completely change the trajectory of my life. And while I wouldn't wish feeling like you're at the bottom of the barrel upon anybody, I often joke because I honestly believe that if I hadn't been through that huge obstacle in my life, I wouldn't have had the motivation to double down and to collapse time the way I have. So if you're somebody who is feeling like there is just no way to move forward, trust me when I tell you, if you're able to have a look through a different lens and just shift your perspective slightly, you'll have this opportunity to collapse time, to make something out of absolutely nothing. And it's actually that pressure that will create the diamond. Because I want you to know that your $65 million moment is coming. And maybe not literally, but symbolically. That moment where life will hand you something that doesn't feel like a win that you wanted, and it will become the foundation of the future that was meant for you. And so the question is not, will you get what you want? The question is, what will you do with what you're already given? And this is the difference between being erased and becoming undeniable. If you've gotten value from today's episode, make sure you subscribe and leave a 5-star review. And if you're ready for more support in building regulated wealth strategies, check out the link in the show notes. Have a beautiful day.